Major, this isn't an exercise anymore. We have real hostiles inside the wire. Confirm that, Sergeant. Last I checked, this was still a blue-on-blue drill. Thermal shows 4 heat signatures moving against the pattern. No Miles harness, no blanks. They're not ours. Maja Elena Markova kept her eyes on the dark ridge. The fake village below glowed faintly under infrared, a ghost town of plywood and scaffolding. Somewhere in there, 2 ranger platoons waited for her to walk into their carefully scripted ambush. Range control says stand down, the radio crackled. White Cell insists it's a simulation anomaly. You move without green light, you're off ROE, Major. A beat of silence. She could hear her own breathing inside the headset, thin and controlled. If we hold, the sergeant pushed, those 4 hit the OP at Talon Ridge in under 5 minutes. That's your people, my people. We'll lose the whole team. Elena watched the signatures crawl closer on the tablet. Wrong spacing, wrong discipline. Not Ranger sloppy, Ranger cocky. This was something else. They're baiting us, she said quietly, or someone's using our exercise as cover. Ma'am, we don't have time to argue philosophy. Another voice cut in, urgent, from the Overwatch element. Vixen actual. Be advised, unknowns just went black. Lost them 10 seconds ago. Elena's thumb hovered over the transmit key. The ROE card folded and damp in her other hand. Disobey and move. Obey and wait. Major? She exhaled once, a sharp, final thing. Vixen elements, she said, voice flat. This is actual, on my authority. 36 hours earlier. Fab al-Sara, UTC +3. Fab al-Sara's conference room was colder than it needed to be. Air conditioning fighting a losing battle against the desert pressing in on all sides. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, pale and unforgiving. Outside the narrow windows, heat shimmered over the sand and the distant silhouettes of blast walls. Maja Elena Markova sat at the end of the table, hands folded, watching 3 Ranger officers pass a laptop back and forth like a joke they weren't sure she should hear yet. Jesus, the younger one snorted. Article 15 for failure to maintain bearing in front of superior officer. Twice. Persistent, the older major said. He had the easy slouch of someone who believed the room belonged to him. Reads like she argues for sport. They knew she was in the room. That was the point. LTC Harris, the battalion commander, leaned over their shoulders, scrolling with one finger. Multiple counseling statements for tone, non-compliance with commander's intent. He glanced up, met her eyes briefly, then went back to the screen. You weren't exactly a favorite, were you, Captain? It's Major now, sir, she said mildly. Her rank had changed last week. The ink on her ID still smelled faintly of plastic. Right, Major. The word rested in his mouth without commitment. Impressive way to make 04. She felt the familiar tension in her neck, that old, stupid impulse to defend herself, to say you should see the pages you can't see. Instead, she let the silence sit. The weak coffee in front of her had cooled into something sour. On the wall, a digital map rotated slowly. The exercise area, the mock town, the Ranger assembly areas, the OP4 zone they'd painted in red as if that made it less controlled. Look at this one, the younger major said, turning the laptop slightly. Refusal to comply with verbal order deemed non-legal within ROE. He read it with a grin, like a punchline. ROE exists for a reason, Elena said. Sometimes it's written after the fact. Harris gave a short laugh that didn't reach his eyes. You'll find things are more straightforward here, Major. This is a training exercise, not whatever moral courtroom you're used to. He tapped the trackpad, scrolling. The unclassified file ended halfway down the screen. She knew the line where the open record stopped and the compartmentalized one began. She'd been there when the wall was built. He hit the divider and frowned. What's this? The other major leaned in. There's a classified annex. Says restricted, need to know. Might be an error. Harris clicked, then paused as the system prompted for higher credentials. He hesitated, then slid a CAC card into the reader and entered a PIN. The laptop thought about it. So did the room. Elena watched the small, spinning icon and felt the air thin, like altitude. She could smell burnt coffee and the faint plastic scent of the projector warming up on the cart beside her. The annex opened. Redacted lines, blocks of black, the occasional operative phrase left alive. Operation names that didn't officially exist. Casualty figures with no units attached. The younger major's smirk drained away. "Sir?" Harris read quietly. His jaw tightened. At one point, his eyes flicked to her and stayed there a moment longer than before, measuring something new. "Multiple deniable operations," he said slowly. "Acting ground force commander. 2 decorations. Classification pending. Name removed from official citation at subject's request." He stopped speaking. The room had gone very still. Elena kept her face neutral, but the words on that screen were stitched to memories. A convoy burning against snow. A radio call that never came. A village where she'd had 10 seconds to decide which lives fit inside a legal paragraph. Her reprimands and her medals belonged to the same knights. "Interesting," Harris murmured. He straightened, closing the annex with a click. "Well, whatever else you are, Major, you're not inexperienced." He walked to the front of the room, clicking the projector on. A slide flashed up. Exercise Iron Mirage, Joint Training Concept. "As of 0400Z tomorrow," he said, "you're assigned as OPFOR Commander. Call sign Vixen Actual. Your job is to make us bleed within the rules." A faint smile returned, controlled this time. "Just enough to learn from it." The older major made a small noise of protest. "Sir, giving OPFOR to an outsider is the point," Harris cut in. "We already know how we'd beat ourselves." He looked back at Elena. Besides, her record suggests creativity. The word landed like a warning. "Any questions, Vixen Actual?" he asked. She studied the map on the wall, the mock town in the center, ranger staging areas wrapped around it like a net someone had never bothered to test. Her assigned AO, painted red and conveniently small. They thought the exercise was theirs, that the script was written, that she would obey it. "No, sir," Elena said. "I understand the mission." She picked up the ROE card from the table, its laminated edges digging into her fingers. The first line read, "This is a simulated environment. All threats are notional." She knew better than most how quickly that sentence could become a lie. Outside, a helicopter passed low over the base, the vibration thrumming through the windows. Harris moved on to the next slide, outlining objectives and timelines, talking about lessons learned and metrics. Elena barely listened. She was already calculating blind spots, weak seams, and the exact distance between what was written and what was possible. They had laughed at her file, right up until the last page. They hadn't asked why someone would ask to have their name removed. They would find out. The motor pool smelled of hot metal and diesel, a low haze of fumes hanging between rows of vehicles. The sun sat high and merciless over Fab al-Sara, turning every exposed surface into something that burned if you touched it too long. Majin Elena Markova stood on the hood of a dusty MRAP mock-up, boots planted wide, watching the loose formation of soldiers below her. A patchwork crowd, reservists, support troops pulled from maintenance shops, a few combat arms strays who had annoyed the wrong sergeant. Some wore their helmets unbuckled, some had their sleeves rolled wrong, and almost all of them had the particular posture of people who believed nothing that happened today would matter. "Up for?" someone muttered. "Babysitting duty." She let them talk. Miles' harnesses hung crooked over their plate carriers. M4A1s with blank adapters rested muzzles down, safety on, but carelessly slung. "Eyes up," Elena said finally. Her voice carried farther than it had any right to in the open yard. Heads turned. A few didn't. She marked each one. "I'm Major Markova," she went on. "Call sign Vixen Actual. Congratulations. You are now the most hated people in this exercise." A ripple of laughter, not all friendly. "Some of you think this is punishment," she said. "Some of you think this is downtime between real work. I'm here to tell you that for the next 10 days, you are the war everyone else is training for." A staff sergeant near the front snorted. "Ma'am, with respect, Rangers ain't losing sleep over a bunch of—" "Sergeant," she cut in. "What's your name?" "Staff Sergeant O'Neill, ma'am." "Good. SSG O'Neill. You're my TOC security NCO for the next 30 minutes. She pointed off to the side, where a cluster of tents, radios, and folding tables had been set up as the OP4 Tactical Operations Center. A few soldiers lounged nearby, half listening. "You have one mission. Nobody gets inside that perimeter without your permission." He straightened a little. "Roger that." She hopped down from the hood, landing in a puff of dust. "Everyone else, form 2 elements on me. Grab your weapons, check your miles, move." They shifted, still loose, half amused, but they moved. She watched how they fell in, who followed orders first, who hung back, who cracked jokes, who went quiet. "ROE reminder," Elena said, walking backward as they formed up. "No simulated kinetic effects inside the civilian role-player zone. That's the town. This," she jerked her chin at the TOC tents, "is ours. Free play. You can kill anyone in there as long as your miles works and your muzzle discipline doesn't make me regret breathing." There were nods, some eye rolls. "Here's the problem," she continued. "Rangers out there think you're a joke. They also think their perimeter security is flawless. They are wrong on both counts. You'll prove it tonight." She paused. "But first, we're going to prove it to ourselves." She split them into 2 squads, tossed leadership at random to soldiers who looked uncomfortable with it, and walked them through a quick, dirty planning session. Approach routes around the motor pool, noise discipline, sectors of fire. It was rough, uneven, full of small mistakes. She let most of them stand. In her head, another map overlaid this one. Another TOC, different continent, different air. Cold then, not heat. The memory of flares arcing over a wire that wasn't supposed to be tested. The sick realization that the enemy had read their routines like a book. The night she'd realized her career would be written in reprimands and classified lines. She blinked, shutting it out. This was plywood and canvas, lasers and beeping harnesses. She repeated it to herself like a lie. "On my command," she told them, "you have 10 minutes to breach that TOC and neutralize everyone in it. They have not been warned. They think this is just where we drink coffee between schedules." A grin returned to O'Neill's face across the yard. He barked at a couple of soldiers to tighten the perimeter, to stand up straight, to at least pretend they cared. "Major, you sure about this?" one of her hastily appointed squad leaders asked under his breath. "We hit our own TOC without warning. This could go sideways real fast." "That's the point," Elena said. "Real enemies don't book appointments." She checked her watch. 3 minutes, move to start lines. Stay out of the civilian lane. If you cross into that, White Cell will eat us alive. They dispersed, some jogging, some sauntering. She keyed her radio, gave a simple, calm net call to the few OP4 staff in the TOC. Routine comms check, nothing more. No warning. She heard coffee mugs clink near the tents, the murmur of casual conversation. When the 10 minutes started, she said only, "Execute." The attack was chaos at first. A private tripped over a fuel hose. Someone bumped a trash can. Voices rose in confusion. But then the training reflexes kicked in. Squads flowed along the sides of vehicles, cutting angles, using the MRAP hulks as cover. Miles' gear chirped as they brought weapons up. A shout went up from the talk. "Hey, what the—" "Contact!" someone yelled. Simulated shots. Harnesses screamed their electronic death cry. Within 90 seconds, the outer ring of guards was down, hands up, laughing angrily. Elena walked behind her assaulting squads, adjusting a stance here, tapping a shoulder there, saying nothing loud enough to break their focus. At 3 minutes, the first squad breached a tent flap, clearing corners as if this were a real fight. The TOC chief, a captain with a coffee stain on his uniform, stood in the middle, blinking as lasers lit up his harness, and the box on his chest wailed. "Are you kidding me?" he sputtered. "This is our talk. You can't—" "Exercise inject," Elena called, stepping inside. "OP4 infiltrated your perimeter. Your TOC is now compromised and destroyed. Please log this as a lesson identified." The TOC chief stared at her, furious, then looked at O'Neill, who was standing just outside, dead, and still catching his breath. "Staff Sergeant," Elena said, "how long did you have to prepare?" 30 minutes, ma'am, he admitted. "How long did they take to kill your talk?" He checked his watch, grimacing. 3. She nodded once. "Exactly how long my last talk had," she said quietly, "and less warning than you." That shut him up. Around them, her makeshift OPFOR soldiers panted, grinned, exchanged slaps on the shoulder. The laughter now was sharper, edged with something like respect. They'd just broken something that wasn't supposed to break. "Okay," Elena said, raising her voice. "Fun's over. Reset your miles. Police up brass. Next time, the Rangers are on the receiving end. And they will not see you coming." As they filed out, more of them met her eye, the joking tone gone. "Yes, ma'am." "Roger, ma'am." "Vixen Actual," one private said under his breath, trying the call sign out like a new piece of gear. She let it stand. By the time the motor pool was quiet again, the unit had a name. Vixen wasn't just a call sign on a slide. It was theirs. Elena stood alone for a moment, watching dust settle in the hot air, hearing echoes of another raid in another place. She folded the ROE card once more in her pocket, feeling its laminated edge cut into her palm. "Tonight," she murmured to herself, "we stop practicing on ourselves." Out beyond the blast walls, the mock town waited, and somewhere past that, the Rangers who still thought OP4 was a joke. They would meet Vixen soon enough. The forward patrol base sat like a squat temporary island in the dark, Hesco walls, T-walls, and concertina wire traced in pale phosphor lines in Elena's NVGs. Beyond it, the desert stretched out in grainy green, empty and watchful. She lay prone on a low rise with her RTO and a squad leader beside her, the three of them just outside the exercise wire. The Miles harness pressed into her chest armor, stiff and unforgiving. "Copy, Vixen Actual," the RTO whispered, radio pressed to his ear. "Ranger 2nd Platoon confirms they are set and secure. All sectors covered." Of course they were. Below, red lens flashlights bobbed along the interior walkway. A sentry paused at the corner tower, rifle cradled, scanning with the lazy pattern of someone who knew the script. See nothing. Report nothing. Elena checked her watch. 021 Sam, local, UTC Plargs 3. Shift change in 13 minutes. She'd asked earlier in the day if her OP4 element could be attached as local irregulars to test the perimeter cooperatively. The platoon leader had smiled too wide and said, "Ma'am, with all due respect, Rangers wrote the book on patrol base security. We're good." He'd said it over lukewarm coffee, the mock village behind him, his platoon moving with that swaggering efficiency everyone admired. She'd nodded, filed away his confidence, and watched where his eyes didn't go, toward the narrow service gap where a HESCO wall met a generator shed. Now, that gap was a darker smear in her NVGs. ROE check, she murmured. Read it back. The squad leader beside her, a sergeant with dust ground into every seam of his gear, recited quietly, "No capturing opposing officers inside designated sleep cycles. No kinetic effects in the civilian role-player zone. Respect white cell safety calls. All actions through miles." "Good," Elena said. "Is this within designated sleep cycle?" He peered down. Inside the PB, a pale rectangle of light showed where the command post tent glowed. Figures moved inside. A couple of silhouettes still walked the interior perimeter. "Negative, ma'am," he said. "This is shift change. They're awake, or supposed to be." "Exactly." She keyed her radio to a discrete Vixen net. "All Vixen elements, this is actual. ROE compliant probe commencing. Clock starts at my mark. Objective is the Ranger CP. No civilian lanes, no reckless firing. Make it clean." A hushed chorus. "Copy. Actual." She raised her own NVG slightly, letting the night become darkness again. There was a moment from her past that always surfaced at times like this. A perimeter someone else had sworn was airtight, a talk that had gone silent in less than 3 minutes. She remembered the after-action report calling it an unexpected probing attack. That was one word for it. "Sergeant," she said, "mark my time." "Ready, ma'am." "Mark." She moved first, a short, low sprint along the contour of the rise, trusting her squad to follow. Gravel shifted under her boots, each sound too loud in her ears. The air was cool. Finally, the heat bled off after sunset. She could hear a distant rotor thumping somewhere over the main base, too far to matter here. They slid down into the dead ground between the PB and the low rise. NVGs flipped down again. The HESCO wall loomed ahead, a jagged, familiar silhouette. "Gap at the generator," she breathed. "Two-man team, left side. Rest, stack on the north tower shadow." Her element peeled off without argument now. Yesterday's motor pool raid had earned her a currency more valuable than formal authority. Up in the tower, a Ranger sentinel turned lazily, scanning over their heads. He never looked down into the shadows where walls met earth, where someone with patience could crawl. Elena reached the generator shed, felt the vibration through her gloved hand. The narrow gap where the HESCO didn't quite meet the housing was just wide enough for a body and a rifle barrel. A length of concertina had been half-heartedly strung across it, then pushed aside to make room for maintenance. "Security by inconvenience," she muttered. She pushed the wire aside, careful not to snag her harness, and slid through sideways, feeling the earth scrape her armor. On the other side, the world opened into the interior of the PB. Rows of tents, a few glow sticks marking lanes, the pale lantern of the CP tent ahead. Inside that canvas glow, the platoon leader would be ticking boxes on a checklist, assured that his perimeter was locked. Her squad filtered through behind her, one by one, silent shadows. Miles' harnesses beeped softly as they bumped, then went quiet again. "No engagements until we hit the CP," she whispered. "If they see you, you're already too late." They moved along the inside of the HESCO, hugging the darkest angles, stepping over discarded water bottles and a forgotten helmet. A soldier emerged from a tent, stretching, headed toward the latrine. He walked right past them, eyes half closed, never looking left. Elena's stomach tightened, not with fear this time, but with a familiar, bitter recognition. This was how people died in real places. Not in firefights, but in gaps no one respected. They reached the CP tent. Barked voices inside, a low hum of radios. She signaled, then ducked through the flap. 4 Rangers looked up, expressions shifting from annoyance to confusion to alarm in rapid succession. "Who?" the platoon leader started. Elena raised her M4, the miles sensor on his harness square in her sight picture. "Sir," she said calmly. "You've been infiltrated. You're dead." Her squad followed suit, weapons leveled, sensors lighting up. Harnesses shrieked as lasers triggered them. 2 NCOs swore, slapping at the boxes as if that would change the adjudication. "Time," Elena called. 4 minutes, 37 seconds, ma'am, her sergeant answered from the tent flap. The platoon leader stared at her, jaw clenched. "You can't just walk into my CP and declare, 'I came through your perimeter,'" she said. "Through a gap you left open, during your own shift change, with 12 people within ROE." She pointed to his harness, still flashing its electronic death. "Your system says you're dead, not me." Outside, other harnesses began chirping as Rangers finally reacted, seeing OPFOR inside their wire and opening fire too late. The air filled with beeps and shouted curses. "This is bullshit," one of the NCOs snapped. "We'd never let that happen for real." Elena felt the old temptation to argue. Instead, she reached into her pocket and produced his ROE card, which she'd asked to see during the afternoon briefing. She tapped the line about sleep cycles. "I didn't touch you while you were down," she said. "I waited until you claimed to be fully manned and alert. You said you were. Your security disagreed." The platoon leader's anger shifted, just a little, to something more complicated. "You planned this," he said. "Yes, sir," Elena replied. "The enemy tends to." She stepped back, letting the tent fill with the noise of frustrated Rangers and OPFOR soldiers grinning behind their NVGs. Minutes later, White Cell called over the net, adjudicating the OPFOR raid successful. The PB was considered compromised. The Rangers were to reset and conduct an immediate after-action review. As Elena walked back out through the gap at the generator, her radio crackled on a different net. "Vixen. Actual, this is Battalion 6, a calm voice said. LTC Harris. Report to my TOC at 0600 for a private debrief." She froze for half a second, then resumed walking. "Copy 6, she answered. "Vixen Actual RTB." The cool air couldn't quite wash away the heat in her chest. She had proven her point. Now, she would see what it cost. The main talk was a box of cold air and bright screens in the middle of a desert that didn't care about either. Its canvas walls shook in the morning wind, grit whispering against the fabric like someone trying to get in. Maji Elena Markova stepped through the flap at 0600 sharp. Inside, the hum of generators mixed with the steady chatter of Syncgar's radios and the soft clatter of keyboard keys. Digital map boards washed the space in shifting blues and reds. Kyoel Jensen stood at the center, arms folded, eyes fixed on the operational picture. He didn't look up when she approached. The posture alone told her more than words would. "Reporting as ordered, sir," Elena said. Jensen finally turned. He had the posture of a man who had slept 3 hours and made it look like 8. "Major Markova, walk with me." He led her to a quieter corner of the tuck where a small table held a pot of burnt coffee and a stack of laminated ROE cards. He didn't offer her a seat. "I got the White Cell adjudication," he said. "Your raid on 2nd Platoon's patrol base was thorough." "That was the intent, sir." He exhaled, not quite a sigh. "Major, this exercise has strategic observers, international partners, press embeds. Everyone wants Iron Mirage to run smoothly. They want Rangers to demonstrate capability, not get embarrassed by OPFOR before day 3. She kept her expression flat. "Sir, with respect, competence isn't embarrassed by scrutiny." "Don't," he warned quietly. "Don't make this a philosophical debate." He tapped one of the ROE cards with a finger. "I need you to dial it back. Let the script breathe. Hit them, but don't humiliate them. We're not here to win. We're here to train." Elena felt the same cold drop in her stomach she'd felt years ago in a different talk with a different commander when a soft directive had overridden a hard truth. She remembered watching a patrol walk out on an operation they weren't ready for because someone above wanted optics instead of warnings. "Sir," she said, choosing her tone with care, "they have gaps that need correcting. Real gaps. Not your concern." Jensen's voice hardened. "Your role is scripted opposition, not free play, not independent command. I'm ordering you to moderate your aggression." There it was, the political line in the sand. "Yes, sir," she said. The words came out smooth, practiced. Jensen studied her for a moment, eyes narrowing. "Good. I need predictable OP4, not a rogue variable." He turned away, already moving back to the main screens. "White cell will still give you latitude. Use it smartly." "Understood." She saluted, stepped out, and let the desert heat hit her like a wall. The air was already rising off the sand in rippling waves. For a moment she stood still, breathing through the urge to break something. In her command tent, she sat at the folding table and pulled up her current operations order on the battered laptop. Her reflection stared back at her in the dark screen before it woke. Tired eyes, sand-crusted lashes, a smear of dust across her cheek. "Dial it back," she muttered. She opened a new fragmentary order. Typed fast, efficient, no theatrics. Frago 3A. Adjust op for posture to appear reduced. Increase reliance on civilian role-player reporting. Initiate misinformation campaign targeting ranger movement assumptions. Exploit dawn and dusk transitions. No direct CP raids without explicit white cell cover. Everything else within ROE remains authorized. She reviewed it. It met Jensen's words exactly, and his intent not at all. She hit send. A moment later, she keyed her radio on a secure Vixen net. "All elements actual. Stand by for Frago. We adapt posture, not intent. Read it carefully. No deviations from ROE." Her lieutenants acknowledged, voices crisp. The shift from skepticism to trust had been fast, but real. Next, she walked to the mock village on foot. Contractors were setting up for the day, adjusting costume clothes, checking props, running power cables. One of them, a wiry man in a faded vest, spotted her and shook his head. "You again?" he said. "Ma'am, we're not supposed to take sides. That's in our contract." "I'm not asking you to take sides," Elena replied. "I'm asking you to pay attention. Rangers will move through here today. If you see them use the same routes they did yesterday, mark them on this." She handed him a small, laminated grid of the village sectors. "Hand it back at end of day, quietly." He hesitated. "This is bending the rules." "I know," she said, "but it's safer for everyone if we see the whole picture." Safer. The word tasted wrong. Nothing about this exercise felt safe, not with the echoes of old patterns surfacing in the new injects. Other role players drifted over, curious. She traded cooperation for simple things: extra water, shade breaks, a promise she would shield them from ranger frustration. Not technically forbidden, not technically encouraged. By midday, she had a network. Quiet, informal, deniable. Back in her tent, her RTO approached with a tablet. "Ma'am, message from White Cell. Rangers filed a formal complaint. Says you're manipulating role players outside authorized conduct." She closed her eyes briefly. The warning from above hadn't taken long to materialize into paperwork. "File it," she said. "We knew it was coming." The RTO hesitated. "Ma'am, they're mad." "So am I," she said softly, "but only one of us is using it." Outside, the wind shifted, blowing sand against the T-walls with a rasping hiss. Vixen was awake. The Rangers were irritated, and command had drawn its first line. All of it was exactly where Elena needed it, so long as she stayed one decision ahead of the consequences. The mock village looked almost innocent in the harsh afternoon light. Low concrete shells, plywood facades, faded signage in 3 languages. Loudspeakers on crooked poles played a recorded call to prayer on a loop, tinny and a fraction off key. Dust devils chased candy wrappers down empty alleys. Major Elena Markova walked down the main street with her helmet unclipped and her miles-equipped M4 at low ready. Contractors lounged in doorways in costume. Headscarves, dish dashas, cheap plastic jewelry. A couple of them smoked beside a trash barrel fire that smelled of burnt plastic and old cooking oil. Vixen actual on the ground, her RTO murmured over her shoulder into the radio. Raven is up, feed is clean. Above, the faint buzz of the RQ-11 Raven blended with the wind. On the small tablet in the RTO's hand, the overhead view showed rooftops and alleys in jittery grayscale. No Rangers yet. They were staging outside the wire, rehearsing entry drills for a cordon and search that looked textbook on PowerPoint. Elena stopped beside the same wiry contractor she'd spoken to earlier, a man with a laminated ID badge and a permanently skeptical expression. Today he wore a frayed vest and carried a plastic bag of fake bread. "You're back," he said. "Ma'am." "I am," she replied. "You have the grid?" He patted his vest. "Got it. Some of the others?" "Not happy. They say this is above their pay grade." "It isn't," another contractor put in. A woman leaning in a shop doorway, arms folded. "We're paid to react to what the script says, not to help one side cheat." "I'm not asking you to cheat," Elena said. She kept her voice low, careful. The liaison officer's trailer was only a block away. "I'm asking you to notice. When you see Rangers using the same route more than once, mark it. When they always stop at the same door, remember?" The woman arched an eyebrow. "And then you make them look stupid." "And then I make them adjust," Elena said. "Here, that's an inconvenience. Somewhere else, it's the difference between them going home or not." She didn't say where somewhere else was. The images rose anyway. A real village, not plywood, where no one had grid cards or ROE laminated in their pockets. Where the call to prayer had been live, not looped. Footsteps scuffed on gravel. The village liaison approached, an officer with a clipboard, reflective belt, and the weary air of someone used to saying no. "Major Markova," he called. "Got a minute?" "Always," she said. He lowered his voice as he reached her. "I've got Rangers asking why the locals are suddenly more observant. They think you're coaching them. That's a problem." "I briefed them on safety," Elena replied. "Told them to stay clear of blind corners during maneuvers, to step out of choke points when troops move through." "That's part of it," the liaison conceded. "But they're also describing civilians who watch their routes, who seem to know which squads are where. You know that starts to look like human shield territory, right? ROE says, 'No civilians used deliberately as shields,'" she finished. "I know. I'm not putting anyone between guns. I'm asking them to be cameras." He glanced at the contractors clustered nearby. "Perception matters, Major. Rangers feel like the deck's stacked. My people feel like extras in somebody else's argument." Elena considered that. Above them, the Raven's buzz shifted as it circled. On the tablet, a convoy icon blinked, marking the Ranger column rolling toward the village. "Okay," she said. "Here's what I can give you." She turned to the contractors. "You log information. You keep your distance. No crowding patrols. No blocking doorways. In return, I'll make sure your breaks are respected. No last-minute stay on station when the schedule says you're done. And if any unit tries to lean on you because of this, you come to me. I'll take that fight." The woman in the doorway studied her. "You'd go up against the Rangers for us?" "I already did," Elena said. "You just haven't read that email thread." A small ripple of laughter broke some of the tension. The liaison rubbed his forehead. "You're not making my life easy." "I'm not making theirs easy," she corrected. "Yours is collateral." He sighed, then nodded once. "Fine. But Major, this is a thin line. If White Cell decides you're using civilians as a tactical tool instead of environmental realism, they'll shut you down. I'm counting on them reading their own ROE, she said, and on us staying inside it. He walked away, shaking his head. Moments later, the first Ranger squad entered the village, stacked tight on the lead man, weapons up. The loudspeaker launched into the call to prayer again. Its digital muezzin voice cracked and slightly distorted. Dust swirled around their boots. From her vantage point in a second-story window, Elena watched through her NVGs as civilians did exactly what she'd asked. They drifted out of habitual doorways, peered down side streets, quietly took mental notes. Nothing dramatic, just eyes. On the Raven feed, she watched the Rangers fall into predictable patterns. Same intersection halt, same rooftop overwatch, same courtyard they favored for consolidating. Her RTO marked each on the tablet. Vixen 2, this is actual, she said softly into the radio. You'll find a nice surprise at Grid Hotel 7 when they repeat that trick tomorrow. Make it educational. Copy actual, came the reply. Educational. By the time the Rangers exfiltrated, the contractors had a story to tell. That evening, back at Vixen's talk, Elena collected their short, quiet observations. Routes, names overheard, habits. It was almost comfortable, this web of watchers. Too comfortable. She'd seen a version of it before, where the villagers hadn't been paid, where the information currency was fear instead of extra water and shade. That time, the return volley had been mortars, not miles beeps. No ROE card had covered that either. Ma'am, her RTO said, breaking the memory, you should see this. He handed her a printed copy of a new message. Ranger Unit Header. Subject, concern regarding civilian role player manipulation. A sergeant's statement was attached, describing unnaturally informed locals and speculating about OPFOR coaching. Elena read it, then placed it neatly beside the earlier complaint. The pile was growing. Log it, she said. We're visible. That means we're doing something. Outside, the loudspeaker started its call again. The same synthetic voice echoing between empty streets. The village was fake. The patterns were not. And somewhere, buried in the friction between them, the next line she would have to cross was already forming. The legal office was a shipping container with delusions of authority. 4 metal walls, 2 desks, and a laminated poster about ethics peeling at the corners. The air inside was stale, recycled by a small AC unit that hummed too loud for the space. A plastic clock ticked on the wall, each second sharp enough to count casualties by. Majin Elena Markova sat in a folding chair that leaned slightly to one side and tried not to think about how familiar this particular angle of interrogation felt. Opposite her, a captain in legal branch colors shuffled a stack of printed emails. His name tape read Collins. He had a neat mustache and the careful, neutral expression of someone who had been told this was routine, but had seen the sender list. Major Markova, he began. Thanks for coming in. I was ordered here, sir, she said, but you're welcome. He almost smiled, then thought better of it. We're reviewing a complaint filed by elements of the Ranger Battalion regarding your conduct with civilian role players. He tapped the packet. Specifically, allegations that you're using them to gain an unfair advantage and potentially as de facto human shields. The phrase sat between them, heavy and inaccurate. Do you have the ROE card, Captain? She asked. He slid one across the desk. Same laminate she carried, same tiny print. Paragraph 3, she said. Read it aloud. He glanced down. Civilians will be treated as non-combatants at all times. Exercise participants will not deliberately place civilians in harm's way or require their presence for mission success. Interactions for purposes of training realism are authorized. Good, Elena said. Now the complaint? Collins flipped to the statement. Sergeant First Class Owens reports that role players appeared unnaturally informed of Ranger movements and reacted in ways that indicated coaching by Op 4. He cites civilians stepping out of alleys prior to squad movement, changing positions based on patrol patterns, and displaying awareness of where Rangers were likely to be. "Do you see any mention," she asked, "of me directing those civilians to physically interpose themselves between weapons?" "No, ma'am." "Any allegation that I ordered them into the line of fire? That I told my troops to use them as cover?" He shook his head. "No. The concern is more about exploitation of the environment." "Environment is the point of an exercise," Elena said. She kept her tone even. "Those contractors are paid to simulate a population. Populations watch. They learn patterns. If Rangers don't like being observed, that's a training objective, not a legal violation." Collins scribbled something. "The battalion's argument is that your coordination goes beyond environmental realism, that you're effectively running a human network." She considered whether to deny it outright, decided not to insult both of their intelligence. "I am using authorized interactions," she said carefully, "to encourage role players to behave like a real population would under prolonged presence of armed forces. They notice routes. They talk. They remember which squads are polite and which aren't. That's realism. I also requested they report their observations. That's still within the Interactions for Training Realism clause." He flipped through another page, an email chain she recognized. Her response to the liaison, pithy and precise. "Your promise to shield them from Ranger frustration," he read, "could be interpreted as you positioning yourself as their advocate against the training unit." "It could," Elena allowed. "Or it could be read as me preventing an unnecessary conflict that would degrade the exercise. Pick your verb." The clock ticked. The AC hummed. Somewhere outside, a vehicle backfired, the sound muted by insulation and distance. Collins set his pen down. "Off the record, Major. Why push this hard? You already made your point with that patrol base raid. Now you're poking at the edges." Her first answer wasn't something she was willing to say in a container with thin walls. Instead, she looked at the ROE card again. "Because these edges are where real deployments live," she said. "If they only train against enemies who play fair, they will bleed later against ones that don't. I am staying inside the lines they wrote. If they don't like what that looks like, they can change the lines." He exhaled slowly. "You understand that's not my job?" "I do." He picked up his pen again. "Okay. Here's where we are. The complaint alleges misconduct. The facts we have show you coordinated with role players, emphasized safety, and collected observations. No civilians were ordered into danger, and no ROE paragraphs were explicitly violated." He paused. "But your intent walks right up to that line." "Intent isn't printed on the card, Captain." "That's the problem," he said quietly. "I can't adjudicate intent. Only actions." He finished writing, then looked up. "My recommendation will be not sustained, but noted. You won't be removed from Op 4. The complaint will stay on record, and I strongly suspect you're now on every senior officer's radar." The hollow satisfaction settled in her chest like sand. She'd won. Narrowly, technically. Nothing about the battalion's mindset had changed. If anything, the resentment would calcify. "Understood," she said. He stacked the papers, aligning the edges with unnecessary precision. "One more thing, Major. This is unsolicited advice." She raised an eyebrow. "You keep winning on technicalities," Collins said. "Someday someone with more rank than patience is going to decide the problem isn't the rules. It's you." She thought of the classified annex to her file. The operations where that had already happened. The nights where being right had not prevented anyone from bleeding. "Someday already came, Captain," she said. "This is the sequel. He didn't know what to do with that, so he said nothing. Outside, as she stepped into the bright heat, the radio on her chest crackled. "Vixen Actual, this is 2, her logistics-minded lieutenant said. "Got a situation at the container yard. Rangers are pulling supplies for tomorrow. You might want to see this." Rangers mad at her, legal watching her, ROE giving her just enough rope to hang her career with, and now, logistics. "On my way," Elena replied. If they wanted the war to stay on paper, they shouldn't have drawn such detailed maps. The container yard was a maze of steel and sun. Rows of ISO containers rose around the packed dirt lot like a crude city, each one radiating heat. Forklifts beeped as they reversed, their diesel engines coughing. Dust hung in the air, turning every shaft of light into a dirty column. Majanj Elena Markova stepped through the narrow gap between 2 stacks, the smell of fuel and hot metal wrapping around her. Her RTO trailed behind with a clipboard and a tablet, trying not to get run over. "Vixen Actual, this is 2, her logistics lieutenant said, waving her over. He stood beside a skid of palletized crates marked with orange tape. "Exercise ammunition. Training use only." A second skid held blue-marked fuel containers, also tagged for simulation tracking. Nearby, a Ranger staff sergeant in a faded ball cap was arguing with a civilian forklift driver. "I don't care what your spreadsheet says," the sergeant snapped. "My battalion request is for 10 pallets to Cop Sable, not 8. We're running a battalion live fire, not a picnic." The driver shrugged. "I move what's on the movement order, Sergeant. I don't write it." Elena approached, catching the tail end of the exchange. The sergeant clocked her rank and scowled. "Ma'am," he said tightly, "you here to make our resupply realistic too?" "Just observing," she replied. "Rangers wrote the book on logistics, right?" His jaw flexed. "We wrote the book on a lot of things people like you keep trying to improve." She let that slide. The lieutenant sidled closer, voice low. "Ma'am, I pulled the movement orders. White Cell pushed a new routing table this morning. They're shifting some exercise ammo through a forward depot in our AO before it goes to the Rangers. To test joint logistics resilience." He showed her the tablet, a digital form with arrows and station codes. The new path sent 8 pallets straight to Cop Sable. 2 pallets, both ammo and fuel, were scheduled to move first to an intermediate depot, Vixen Log Site. She hadn't requested that. Someone up the chain had decided to make things more interesting. "ROE?" she asked. "Real-world med and water untouchable," the lieutenant said. "These pallets are tagged exercise only. Tracking is for scenario integrity, not safety." So the line was clear, and once again, there was empty space between what was written and what was assumed. Elena walked over to the Ranger sergeant. "What's your timeline to Sable?" "Step at 1600 on objective by 1800, he replied. "We've got air sim support. Battalion's calling it a showcase." He looked at the pallets. "If we don't get full loads, that showcase turns into a clown show." She nodded, as if commiserating. "I'll see what I can do." She didn't promise anything. That mattered. In the small yard office, a prefab box with a fan that barely moved the hot air, she sat with the movement clerk, a corporal with a keyboard and dead eyes. "You have authority to adjust routing within the approved nodes?" she asked. "Within reason, ma'am," he said. "As long as the end destination matches the request and White Cell gets the numbers." She pointed at the screen. "Show me Vixen Log Site." He clicked. A small warehouse icon blinked inside her assigned AO, a notional depot. Perfectly legitimate. "I want those 2 pallets, ammo and fuel, logged as held for inspection at Vixen Log until Battalion Sable acknowledges receipt of the first 8, she said. "They still get everything, just staggered." The corporal frowned. "Ma'am, That could put them tight on their exercise timeline. They're elite, she said. They'll adapt. He hesitated. You're Op 4, right? Yes. This feels like stacking the deck. Stacking the deck would be redirecting. Supplies off their books, Elena replied. I'm not doing that. I'm honoring their request and White Cell's routing. I'm just letting friction exist at the point where it's safest to learn from it. He didn't look convinced, but the order fit inside his rules. Eventually, he typed the changes. On her way out, Elena paused between containers, out of sight. She remembered a different yard, different war. Fuel trucks mysteriously delayed, ammo shipments diverted by a ghost on the logistics net. They'd hunted the enemy commander responsible for that, someone who had understood that bullets and gas were softer targets than men. When they finally cornered him, weeks later, they'd found ledgers, not battle plans, columns of numbers, arrows between depots. He'd fought with a calculator and a radio. Standing in the hot container canyon, she felt a flicker of unwelcome kinship. This is an exercise, she told herself quietly. No one dies because they hit Winchester in a fake valley. But patterns didn't care what label you put on them. At 1600, she was in her 2C, watching the feed. The Ravens video showed the Ranger column snaking toward Cop Sable, vehicles kicking up dust. Digital overlays tagged them with call signs and ammo states piped from exercise trackers. Actual, this is Vixen 2, her lieutenant reported. Rangers just pushed their first contact drill. They're burning through sim ammo fast. Copy, she said. Keep eyes on their resupply timeline. At 1745, as the lead elements moved into their final approach, an icon on the logistics panel flashed yellow. Ammo state? Elena asked. Multiple squads at Training Winchester, the lieutenant replied. They called for resupply 10 minutes ago. Vixen log reports pallets still staged pending inspection clearance. White Cell didn't intervene. This was still inside the game. Over the net, on a range channel she wasn't supposed to listen to but did, a harried ranger voice snapped, "We were promised full loads on deck. Why the hell is Op 4 sitting on our ammo?" Elena keyed her own internal net instead. All Vixen elements, this is actual. Be advised, Ranger Assault is operating under constrained ammo states. Expect reduced tempo, increased frustration. Adjust harassment accordingly, non-kinetic where possible. I want lessons, not riots. The assault limped to a conclusion, half of its scripted brilliance swallowed by empty magazines and forced pauses. White Cell adjudicated a partial mission success with significant logistical deficiencies. By dusk, word was moving faster than forklifts. Op 4 had messed with Rangers' lifelines. In the container yard, pallets finally shifted toward Sable. In the battalion talk, brows furrowed. And in Vixen's tent, Elena began sketching a wider circle on the map, one that wrapped not just around a patrol base, but around an entire battalion that now knew she could reach more than just their wire. Tonight they were inconvenienced. Tomorrow, she thought, they could be surrounded. The desert at night swallowed noise, then returned it in strange ways. Footsteps sounded too loud. Voices vanished. Rotor wash from the UH-60 simulator seemed to come from everywhere at once. Maji Elena Markova crouched beside a low berm, NVGs down, watching the faint green smudge of the Ranger Battalion Teok 200 meters away. Tense silhouettes huddled together behind HESCO walls, light bleeding through canvas, a beacon, and a target. Vixen 1 and 3 are in position, her RTO whispered. Outer ring is set. We've got them wrapped on 3 sides. And the 4th? She asked. Natural terrain, ma'am. Cliff line. They're not going anywhere that way. She nodded. Good. Behind her, 2 of her lieutenants knelt, faces ghostly under the NVGs. Lieutenant Hayes, younger and still a little too eager, and Lieutenant Rahman, older, with the wary look of someone who had seen more than a training cycle's worth of fallout. "Ma'am," Rahman said quietly, "before we kick this off." "Are we sure?" She glanced back at him. "About what?" "Encircling a Ranger battalion talk and declaring them combat ineffective." His voice stayed professional, but the worry bled through. "You humiliated a platoon. You choked their logistics. Doing this, you're going after their identity." Hayes shifted. "White Cell approved the framework," he said, more to himself than anyone. "We're within the scenario." "Framework," Rahman repeated, "right up until someone decides it wasn't what they really meant." Elena felt the weight of that. She also felt the ticking in her chest, the sense that the exercise had already stretched beyond what the scriptwriters had imagined. "This is about patterns," she said. "They assume their TOC is sacred. It's not. Not in war, and not in this sandbox. We take the head, the body learns something, or at least remembers the bruise." "And if the head complains?" Rahman asked. "Then I get another counseling statement," she said. "Get in line." On the horizon, the simulated UH-60, call sign Ghostbird, thundered past, low and fast, a spotlight briefly lancing out over an empty sector to their north. Not an actual aircraft, but the noise and the adjudication rules were real enough. "Remember," Elena said into her radio, voice low, "ROE prohibits sim strikes within 100 meters of the TOS. Ghostbird is a distraction only. All kills inside that bubble are on foot. Miles only. No one fires unless I call it." Acknowledgements crackled back from Vixen 1 and 3. She inhaled once, slow, feeling the cool air burn slightly in her lungs. The last time she'd gone after a command node this aggressively, the world had not been made of canvas. And Velcro sensors. The fallout had taken years to settle, and some of it never had. "Time?" she asked. 0200 local, her RTO said. "Green light from White Cell at 0201. She watched the seconds tick on her wrist. The talk glowed lazily, shadows moving inside. Somewhere in there, LTC Harris and his staff were tracking company movements, confident in their ring of security. Confident that Op 4 was out harassing patrols and soft targets, not staring down at their heart. "Vixen elements," Elena said, thumb on the transmit switch. "This is actual. At my mark, Ghostbird makes its noise. Outer ring tightens. My element moves on the talk. Objective is live capture. Every harness inside that perimeter, dead or detained. Minimal drama, maximum clarity. This is a lesson, not a riot." She clicked to Ghostbird's net. "On you!" The simulated helicopter roared in again, louder this time, flying a deliberately sloppy racetrack just outside the TOC security zone. Floodlight beams swung wide, as if they were hunting Op 4 at the outskirts. Inside the perimeter, she saw movement spike. Guards shifting, eyes and muzzles drawn outward, toward the loud threat. "Mark," she whispered. Her assault element moved. 12 figures in dark kit slipping through the faint shadow line where the HESCO wall met a service trench. They had rehearsed this approach 3 times on a sand table, once in an empty lane between containers. Now every detail mattered. The pace, the discipline, the fact that their miles emitters were taped to reduce stray reflections. The closest Ranger Guard barely had time to pivot before a Vixen soldier's laser tagged his harness. The box on his chest chirped and went to a steady whine. "What the—" His oath cut off as Elena's gloved hand found his shoulder. "Shh," she said. "You're dead. Be a quiet ghost." They slipped past him and into the inner ring. Tent walls flapped in the rotor wash, casting shifting shadows. Someone inside shouted for the guard, who was now dead and silent. Elena ducked into the TOC entrance, rifle up, Miles' sensor aligned with the nearest harness, an operations NCO bent over a map board. "Freeze," she said. "You're compromised." The NCO spun, confused. The sensor on his chest screamed as her laser hit. Around the tent, her squad fanned out with rehearsed precision, targeting harness after harness. The noise rose, beeps, curses, shouted demands to know who had let Op 4 this far in. At the center of the tent, LTC Harris straightened slowly, headset still around his neck. For a heartbeat, their eyes met like they had in the briefing room, over the laptop with the classified annex. "Sir," Elena said evenly, "Vixen Actual, you are now a casualty. Your TOC has been penetrated, and your battalion command is neutralized within exercise parameters." His harness shrieked as a Vixen soldier tagged him. He didn't flinch. Outside, other tents were collapsing into chaos as the outer ring closed. Vixen 1 and 3 tightened their encirclement, killing staff as they emerged, herding them into a central holding area marked hastily with chem lights. Her RTO's voice cut in on her earpiece. "White Cell acknowledges Op 4 in Teok. Stand by for adjudication." Seconds stretched. The tent was hot, the rotor wash pressing the canvas inward, making it feel smaller. Harris's jaw worked as he looked around his dead staff, then back at her. "You're enjoying this," he said quietly. "No, sir," she replied. The adrenaline in her veins made the denial feel thin. "But they'll remember it." The radio crackled. "All stations, this is White Cell," a detached voice announced. "Effective immediately. Ranger Battalion combat power is adjudicated at 0. Unit status: combat ineffective due to command node compromise. Reset instructions to follow." There it was, clinical language for what everyone present felt. They'd been taken. Harris exhaled once, sharp. "You've made your point, Vixen Actual," he said. "I hope you like the next script they write for you." She didn't answer. Later, back in her tent, the after-action notes were already coming in. White Cell wanted a meeting. The exercise director wanted a meeting. Somewhere above them, in email chains she couldn't see yet, someone was rewriting Iron Mirage's scenario. On the map in front of her, she circled the now grayed out symbol for the Ranger Battalion. You break the script, she thought, and the script starts looking for ways to break you back. The scenario tent was darker than the talkie, lit mostly by the glow of a projector and a few harsh task lamps. Paper maps and plastic-covered boards lined the walls, crowded with colored cards and scribbled notes. The air smelled of dry erase markers and burnt coffee. Major Elena Markova stood just inside the entrance, helmet under her arm, as the flap fell closed behind her and cut off the desert glare. For a moment her eyes adjusted, and Iron Mirage's new shape resolved in front of her. Major Markova, the exercise director said. He was a lieutenant colonel in civilian pattern cargo pants and an Iron Mirage polo, lanyard heavy with badges. Come on in. Let's reset the game you broke. There were a couple of White Cell officers at the main table, hunched over laptops. One of them avoided looking at her. Another clicked through slides on the projector. Phase 2. Adjustments. I followed the scenario, Elena said. You followed it aggressively, the director replied. He didn't sound angry exactly, more inconvenienced. Your encirclement was within ROE. White Cell validated it, and now our premier training unit is combat ineffective on day 4. We have 4 more days to justify everyone's travel orders. So you're rewriting the war, she said. He gave her a thin smile. We're adapting, as we expect our players to. Ranger Battalion will regenerate in reduced form. You'll see that in their new task org. He tapped a folder on the table. Meanwhile, OPFOR gets new guidance. He slid the folder across. Inside were stapled inject packets and a small encrypted thumb drive in a clear plastic sleeve. ROE updated? She asked. Core ROE remains the same, one of the White Cell majors said quickly. Non-combatants are still non-combatants. No live fire, safety trumps everything. But the threat profile is shifting. Higher headquarters wants us to test responses to more complex adversaries. Complex how? Elena asked. The director clicked to the next slide. A stylized logo appeared, generic and safely fictional. Red dagger movement. Beneath it, bullet points. Networked cells, IEDs, cyber disruption, covert infiltration, standard exercise buzzwords. But the inject cards in the folder told a different story. She flipped through them, skimming. Cell uses repair crews as cover to access sensor masts, captures network topologies. Saboteurs insert into exercise as contractors, map power distribution for future action. Insurgent leadership leverages cultural events in village to mask C2 meetings. Each detail alone was plausible. Together, they drew a silhouette she recognized too quickly. This isn't basic doctrine, Elena said, voice flattening. These are specific TTPs. It's a composite, the director replied. We pulled from multiple threat models to make a more robust scenario. Higher. Loves the buzzword, realistic. The marker squeaked on a nearby whiteboard as a staffer updated an inject timeline. The sound crawled up her spine. Realistic. She had chased a group once whose playbook read like this. Different name on the classified documents. Different logo, if they'd had one. But the same habits. Engineers in coveralls walking around sensor masts. Contractors taking too much interest in generator placement. Meetings tucked into religious holidays when everyone was distracted. Where did you pull this composite from? She asked. The director's smile thinned further. Need to know, Major. I've seen these patterns before, she said. Not on a whiteboard. He glanced at the thumb drive. That's why Higher wanted you here. Officially, you're just Op 4. Unofficially, your experience is informative. So you want me to make your composite bleed better, she said. Your words, he replied. Our guidance is simple. Incorporate these new behaviors into Op 4 operations. Increase pressure on fixed infrastructure. Test Blue Force ability to distinguish between exercise friction and genuine threat signatures. Colin's warning from the illegal trailer flickered in her memory. Someday they decide the problem isn't the rules. It's you. Are any of these signatures being monitored outside the exercise? She asked. If we simulate this pattern and somebody out there is watching, they might see... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. She'd read the cables before. Redacted references to training activities potentially mirroring hostile preparations. Major. The White Cell Major cut in. We're not tasking you to run an intel operation. We're running a scenario. You stay in your lane, we stay in ours. And if the lanes overlap? She asked. Silence. The projector fan buzzed, loud in the pause. The director finally said, Your lane is to make this feel real within safety constraints. Our lane is to ensure nothing leaks where it shouldn't. Trust the process. Trust. The word landed like sand in her mouth. She closed the folder. I'll need these loaded into my planning net. We've prepped a partitioned drive, the major said, sliding the thumb drive closer. Classified template, exercise overlay. You'll only see what you need. Only what you need. She remembered the last time someone had said that over a secure line, right before an op where she'd discovered whole paragraphs cut from her briefings. Paragraphs filled with the kind of context that changed whether a shot was legal or merely survivable. Outside, someone shouted, the sound muffled through the tent fabric. A vehicle horn blared briefly and cut off. Elena weighed the thumb drive in her hand, small and heavier than it should have been. Op 4 will adjust, she said. Good, the director replied. We'll push the updated injects to Ranger Battalion and Coalition observers. The next 48 hours are about infrastructure and insider threats. Make it count. She stepped back out into the hard sunlight, blinking as the heat hit her. The desert seemed cleaner than the air inside that tent. Back in Vixen's talk, she plugged the drive into a secure laptop and opened the files. Redacted blocks met her. Whole sentences turned to black bars. The unredacted portions matched points she could almost recite from memory, line for line, with operations that were supposed to live only on air-gapped systems. Her stomach knotted. This wasn't a composite. It was a mirror, dirtied just enough to claim deniability. She pulled a blank notebook toward her and began sketching. Not the official timeline. That lived on the boards. This was a pattern map. How a real group had sequenced similar moves, what they had targeted first, how they'd used training events as cover. The more she drew, the less she liked the overlap. "Ma'am," her RTO asked carefully, "good news or bad?" "Neither," Elena said. "It's familiar. That's worse." She tapped the notebook with her pen. "I'm going to need to check something against old reports. Don't put any of this on the unclass net. Not yet." If Hire wanted realism, they were about to get it. But if someone outside the wire was also studying that same pattern, Iron Mirage might be more than an exercise. She stared at the black bars on the screen one more time. Next step, find out if the ghosts in her file were now walking around in their scenario. Night settled over Fob al-Sara with a familiar routine. Generators droning, distant laughter from a morale tent, the occasional slam of a vehicle door. Inside Vixen's command tent, the light was a cold blue rectangle from the secure laptop, carving shadows across maps pinned to the walls. Magi Elena Markova sat alone at the folding table, helmet off, sleeves rolled, eyes fixed on the screen. The thumb drive from White Cell lay beside the keyboard like a small, inert accusation. She clicked through another of the composite threat briefs. More injects. More behaviors that were supposed to be fictional. Insurgent subcell tests, range security by entering as contracted maintenance, photographing gate SOPs. Cells use overlapping religious and market events to mask pattern-of-life anomalies. Adversary exploits training exercises to normalize presence near critical infrastructure. She could see faces behind those lines, not clip art insurgents, but specific people. A man with grease under his fingernails and a prayer bead bracelet. A woman who had never looked directly at a camera. None of them lived in a PowerPoint slide. She opened a separate window, this one on a higher classification backbone. Two-factor authentication. Then a second login, then a compartment selector. The header text shifted from black to red. Unauthorized access is prosecutable under UCMJ, the splash screen reminded her. She'd read it 100 times, always before scrolling into things that did not officially exist. She typed search terms she'd never spoken aloud in this theater, operation code names, acronyms that meant nothing to anyone who hadn't been there. Redacted after-action reports populated the screen, each with their own warning banners. She opened one from 3 years ago. The language might as well have been copied into Iron Mirage. Hostile elements leverage presence during multinational training to map sensor coverage. Use of contractor cover allowed repeated access to generator yards without raising suspicion. Notable, adversary-adjusted behavior after exposure to exercise ROE. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the laptop. The hum of the generator outside seemed to grow louder. It wasn't just similar. It was the same pattern, scrubbed of locations and proper nouns, boiled down and poured back into this desert as training realism. She leaned back, chair creaking. She could feel the walls of the compartment wrapping around her. What she knew, what she could never say in an unclassed tent, what she might not be allowed to say even in this one. Information was a privilege and a cage. If she walked into the scenario tent tomorrow and said, "I have fought these people, change your injects," she would be asked why. To answer would be to open a door with no handle on her side. She opened a blank, secure message instead. Addressee: an old mailbox at a higher headquarters, one that routed to a small, overworked cell of people who remembered her name and the annex on her file. Subject: Iron Mirage, pattern overlap inquiry. She wrote slowly, each word measured. Exercise Opt for Guidance includes threat TTPs that appear similar to patterns previously observed in real-world operations under your purview. Request confirmation whether these TTPs are A. derived from sanitized training packages, B. associated with any ongoing real-world monitoring, C. flagged for potential confusion between exercise and non-exercise activities. No specific operational details will be discussed in this channel absent further guidance. Intent is to ensure training fidelity does not unintentionally replicate sensitive signatures. She read it twice. It said nothing and everything at the same time. No dates, no locations. Just enough implication for someone in that cell to feel the same shiver she did. She hit send. The message vanished into the classified backbone. Outside, someone laughed, a short burst, and then there was only the steady drone of the generators again. She waited. Answering her wasn't anyone's top priority. It might not be a priority at all. She pulled up another report to keep her. Hands busy, scanning for more overlap, circling phrases in her notebook. 27 minutes later, the secure inbox pinged. Reply: Iron Mirage TTP selection reviewed. Some overlap with previously observed patterns assessed as acceptable for training. No current indications of active real-world exploitation of exercise. Recommendation: monitor for anomalies inconsistent with scripted injects. Do not escalate without clear indicators. Maintain compartment boundaries. A paragraph to say, "You're not wrong. Don't make us prove it." She closed her eyes briefly. The loneliness sharpened. Everyone else in this exercise was playing a game whose rules were printed on laminated cards. She was playing a second one whose rules were sealed in systems like this, with stakes no one here was supposed to think about. Monitor, but do not escalate. Copy, she murmured to the empty tent, as if the message were a radio call. Monitor and pray the ghosts stay on paper. She logged off the classified network, watching the red header vanish, replaced by the simpler clutter of the exercise. The tent felt smaller when the screen went dark. Outside, beyond the T-walls, the mock village settled into its nighttime pattern. Contractors went back to their trailers. A few remained, taking evening shifts as locals in the alleys. Among them, she now knew, were new faces she hadn't vetted, walking in a pattern someone had written. Someone who had never been close enough to hear what real fear sounded like. If the pattern she knew started repeating down there, the secure email would be worthless. She'd need eyes. She'd need to verify on the ground. She reached for her helmet and flicked on her radio. Vixen. Actual to all elements, she said quietly. We're doing another walk of the village tomorrow. I want IDs on every civilian we haven't seen before. Don't spook them. Just notice. She set the helmet beside the laptop and sat for a moment longer in the blue-gray half-light. The war she thought she'd left in redacted paragraphs was leaning in again, whispering through scripted injects and contractor rosters. And if she was the only one who heard the echo, she would have to decide how much of it she could afford to admit out loud. By late morning, the mock village was already baking. Heat came up from the packed dirt as much as it came down from the sky, turning the alleys into narrow ovens. The air smelled of trash fires, stale cooking oil, and the sharp chemical tang of fake blood packets stored too long in the sun. Magia Elena Markova stood at the village entry checkpoint, body armor sticky against her back, helmet band damp with sweat. A biometric scanner chirped as a contractor pressed his thumb against it, the small device flashing green. ID verified, the specialist at the gate announced, Role player, civilian, slot, Bravo 27. The contractor nodded and stepped past the barrier, blending into the stream of locals, already moving toward their assigned positions. Market stall, mosque door, second floor balcony with a line of laundry. Beside Elena, the contractor coordinator adjusted his reflective belt and flipped through a printed roster on a clipboard. "There," he said. "Same as yesterday. -2 on sick call. No additions to the cast, Major." "You're sure?" she said. He gave her a look that said he'd had this conversation too many times with too many officers. "We run the manifest every morning. If they're in costume, they're on my list. If they're not on my list, they don't get a badge." On the table by his elbow, a stack of laminated roll cards waited. Shopkeeper, imam, student, day laborer. Each had a name, a rough personality sketch, and scripted reactions to common scenarios. "Yesterday I counted at least 4 faces I hadn't seen before," Elena said. "Today I want to know why." He spread his hands. "We're drawing from the same contractor pool. Rotations, sure. But nobody comes in from the outside without going through processing. Processing. Biometric scan. ID check. Quick safety brief. Enough to reassure a system that loved checkboxes, not enough to satisfy the knot in her gut. Her radio crackled softly in her ear. "Vixen. Actual. This is 3. Civilians moving into Sector Delta now. No obvious outliers yet." "Copy 3, she murmured. "Maintain observation. No interaction unless something jumps out." The coordinator sighed. "Look, Major, I know Op4's job is to be paranoid. It's good for business. But these folks are not your bad guys. They're here to get paid and go home. You start treating them like suspects, we're going to have a problem." Elena studied him for a moment. "If I wanted to treat them like suspects, I'd be asking for interrogation rooms, not biometric scans." "Feels like a short walk," he muttered. Another contractor stepped up to the scanner, middle-aged, stocky, ball cap shading his eyes. The sensor bleeped, flashed green again. The specialist read off his badge number. "Says he's been on contract 3 cycles," the coordinator said. "Knows the drill better than we do." Elena nodded absently, her gaze moving past the gate into the village proper. Earlier that year, in another place, another operation, she'd watched a seemingly innocuous repair crew take exactly the same path every morning, past cameras, under sensor towers, around generator yards. Only after the 3rd week had someone bothered to ask why. The answer had come back in fragments of intercepted chatter and a crater where a relay once stood. "Major?" the coordinator prompted. "We done here?" "Not yet." She keyed her radio. "All Vixen elements inside the village. This is actual. New guidance. I want eyes on any role player. Whose ID doesn't match behavior? Overly interested in wiring, towers, gates, anything structural. You see someone watching the watchers, you mark it. No one gets grabbed. We observe only." Acknowledgements came back, a quiet chorus in her ear. She moved into the village, passing between low buildings painted in chipped pastel colors. The loudspeaker on the minaret sputtered to life, the recorded call to prayer warbling over the rooftops. Contractors slipped into their roles, haggling, loitering, arguing in rehearsed cadences. At an intersection, she paused. A group of day laborers lounged against a wall, plastic water bottles at their feet. Most watched the ground or each other. One, tall, wiry, with a sun-bleached scarf around his neck, watched the skyline instead, eyes flicking from tower to tower. Her squad leader, walking just behind her, noticed too. "Ma'am?" he murmured. "Hold," she said. They pretended to check a map, lingering in the shade. The laborer shifted, gestured to one of his companions with a quick hand movement. A flick of 2 fingers, a thumb curled in. It was small, casual. It might have been nothing, except she had seen that exact signal before, across a dusty road far from here, right before a man in similar work clothes had stepped away from a surface-level cable trench and the world had gone white and loud. Her throat tightened. The market noise receded for a second, replaced by the remembered roar of a blast and the crackle of radios afterwards, the words "exercise area" nowhere in the transmission. She forced herself back into the present. The laborer had already looked away, the moment gone. His friend grabbed his bottle, took a drink, laughed at something she couldn't hear. "Sergeant," she said low. "Mark that one. Scarf, gray shirt, laborer badge. He just used a signal I shouldn't see in a training script." "Roger," the squad leader said, voice suddenly very sober. He keyed his own radio. "Vixen elements, this is 3-1. Tagging one role player of interest in Delta 6. Passive shadow only." "Copy," came a reply from another building. "We've got eyes from second story. No contact." Elena stepped away, forcing herself not to stare. The ROE card in her pocket might as well have been made of lead. All personnel inside the wire are presumed friendly unless formally flagged. Formal flagging required white cell, legal, hire. All the people who had just told her this scenario was composite and controlled. She walked, sweat trickling down her spine under the plates, hand resting lightly on the M4's grip. Her world narrowed to two things: the line she was not allowed to cross, and the man in the scarf, whose casual gesture had cracked open the distance between a classified annex and a fake village. If he was just a contractor overacting his part, she would ruin him by pulling the wrong thread. If he wasn't, she was already late. "Shadow him," she said quietly into the radio. "Log every place he looks, every route he walks. Nobody spooks him. Nobody plays hero. We're going to find out whether this war stayed in the computer or walked in with a badge." Talon Ridge wasn't much of a ridge, just a broken line of rock and scrub that rose high enough to see the mock town and the sensor towers around it. From the Overwatch OP, the village lay in a shallow bowl of darkness, broken by the occasional glow stick and the hard white dots of tower lights. The night air was cooler up here, a thin breeze carrying dust and the faint smell of generators. Thermal optics washed the world in black and white. Cold ground, warm bodies, hotter engines. Major Elena Markova lay behind a low parapet of sandbags, eye pressed to the thermal scope. Her RTO was off her right shoulder, radio pressed close, headset cable looping down his neck. "Vixen Actual, this is 3-1, came a quiet voice over the net. "Subject Scarf is in the village. Same laborer getup. He's moving toward the east sensor tower. No rangers in the sector yet." Elena tracked the area in her scope. The east tower's base was a bright, vertical smear of heat where electronics bled into metal. Around it, the ground was a deeper gray. A single human outline approached, shouldered tool bag glowing warmly against a cooler torso. "Copy, 3-1, she said. "Remember, observe only. No detain, no confront." RO wrapped itself around the words like barbed wire. No grabbing contractors without white cell. No treating anyone inside the wire as hostile unless some higher authority blessed the label. Down in the valley, the contractor knelt by the tower's base. To the naked eye, he would have looked like any maintenance tech. Through thermal, she watched his hands move with practiced economy along the conduit run, pausing at junction boxes, lingering at the anchor points that held fiber and power. 3-1, "What's his script card supposed to be?" she asked. "Stand by," came the reply. Papers rustled faintly. Slot Bravo 27, day laborer, market stall assistant, no tech role, no maintenance tasks. "So why is he working a tower?" Elena murmured. Her RTO shifted slightly. Maybe someone reassigned him. Without telling the liaison? Or logging it? She asked. On a background net she monitored but wasn't officially on, a ranger lieutenant complained about OP 4 skulking around the ridge like they're about to call in artillery. "Let them watch," another voice said, amused. "They can take notes on how real units move." They thought Vixen on the ridge was about them. They didn't see what she saw, a ghost from another theater tracing lines that weren't part of any script. Range control cut in on the exercise control frequency, brisk and bureaucratic. All OPI 4 elements, be advised. Remain within assigned maneuver boxes. Avoid unnecessary overlap with contractor activities. We've had reports of intimidating presence impacting role-player performance. The message wasn't addressed to her personally, but it might as well have been. "Copy, range control," Elena said on the appropriate net, voice neutral. "Vixen actual, staying within boundaries." She wasn't moving. Talon Ridge sat firmly inside her box. In the scope, Scarf finished his slow circuit of the tower and moved off, following the line of buried cable toward the next mast. He didn't loiter near doors or play at haggling like the other contractors. His pattern belonged to someone checking arcs and blind spots. It was exactly how it had started last time. Men with tool bags and contractor badges moving in lines that mapped vulnerabilities instead of playing their assigned roles. Everyone had seen them. No one had seen the pattern until it became a crater. Elena? Her first name, in her ear, on a private net. Rahman. "You seeing this?" "Yes," she said. "You going to report it?" She thought of the secure email, monitor but do not escalate, of White Cell's composite story, of the ROE card that forbade her from calling anyone a threat until someone else blessed it. "If I report it without proof," she said quietly, "it's paranoia. If I wait for proof, we might be too late." Silence, except for the soft hiss of the radio and the distant hum of power. "Subject is at second tower," 3-1 whispered. "He's not touching the boxes, just looking, counting, maybe." Elena's fingers tightened on the edge of the parapet. "Actual," her RTO said. "We've got rangers stepping off for their night cordon. They'll be in the village in 20 mics. If that guy's just doing his job, they walk past him. If he's not, they walk past him too." She exhaled slowly. "Okay," she said. "We split the difference." She pulled a weathered notebook from her chest rig and flipped to a blank page. Under the red filtered light, she began to write, voice low as she dictated to herself as much as to the RTO. "Contingency Vixen Delta," she murmured. "Trigger. Multiple anomalies by identified role players matching real-world hostile prep. Condition. No prior White Cell acknowledgement. Actions. Elevate op for observation posture to continuous on specified subjects. Retask Raven to pattern of life on tower approaches and power runs. Preposition Vixen elements at Talon Ridge and 2 secondary choke points, justified as exercise overwatch. Prepare non-kinetic disruption options that can be framed as injects if needed." "Non-kinetic?" the RTO asked. "Power cuts, comms jamming, blocking movements with simulated incidents," she said. "Things you do in an exercise that also happen to ruin a saboteur's day without ever saying he's real." It was a thin plan, stitched between rules and deniability. It stayed inside the exercise on paper and outside it in intent. "Actual, this is 3-1, came the voice again. "Subject just shifted path. He's not going straight to the third tower. He's detouring by the generator yard." Of course he was. The pattern ran itself. Elena felt the inevitability settle over her shoulders like another layer of armor. This was how her last classified war had crept in, through routines and plausible deniability, through the shared space between training and threat. "Shadow team, maintain distance," she ordered. "Raven, focus on generator yard. No one spooks him. If he's clean, we don't ruin his life. If he's not..." She didn't finish. In her scope, Scarf paused by the fence line of the generator compound, head tilted just so, counting something only he could see. "Contingency Vixen Delta is now on prep," she said softly. "We stay inside the exercise, right up until it stops being one." The breeze picked up, rattling a loose piece of camo netting above her. Radios whispered in overlapping nets. Thermal silhouettes moved across the village. Contractors, sensors, rangers forming their cordon. She watched the man by the generators and felt the map in her head shift. Iron Mirage had just become a possible opening move. The next choice she made would decide which war she was actually fighting. The ridge was quieter than it had any right to be. No wind now, just the soft hiss of radios and the distant, steady hum of the base's generators. The desert below lay in overlapping shades of green through Maj. Elena Markova's NVGs, the mock town a cluster of angular shadows dotted with points of light. On the tablet in front of her, 4 heat signatures crawled along a line that wasn't supposed to exist, moving in a staggered file, too loose for technicians, too tight for casual workers. "Major, this isn't an exercise anymore. We have real hostiles inside the wire." Her sergeant's voice was low but urgent beside her. He pointed at the screen, where the icons shone a little brighter against the cooler ground. No Miles harness signatures, no transponders, just heat. "Confirm that, Sergeant," Elena said. "Last I checked, this was still a blue-on-blue drill." He tapped through overlays. "All exercise participants are supposed to be on the green layer. These 4 aren't tagged as anything. Range control has no record of contractor movement in that corridor." She watched the icons crawl, intersecting the cable route from the generator yard to the ridge sensors. Exactly where Scarf had walked earlier, only farther out. "Thermal shows 4 heat signatures moving against the pattern," the sergeant said, echoing the words she already knew. "No Miles harness, no blanks. They're not ours." The radio on her chest clicked. "Vixen Actual, this is range control. Be advised, your OP at Talon Ridge is in observation-only posture. Do not maneuver without white cell tasking. Repeat, stay in your lane." Another voice layered over it on a different net, clipped and irritated. "We've had enough OP4 freelancing for one exercise, Major. Let the scenario run. Any anomalies are on us to adjudicate." On the ROE card in her pocket, the key paragraph might as well have been bolded. "All movements outside assigned boxes require control approval." "If we hold," the sergeant said quietly, eyes still on the screen, "those 4 hit the OP at Talon Ridge in under 5 minutes. That's your people, my people. We'll lose the whole team." Elena's throat tasted of dust. On the ridge behind her, 10 Vixen soldiers waited in shallow scrapes, rifles dark, harnesses blinking faintly when bumped. They thought they were here to watch the Rangers, to be a chess piece in someone else's training design. On the tablet, the 4 signatures moved with the wrong kind of confidence, not fast, not slow, checking angles, covering arcs. "They're baiting us," she said. "Or someone's using our exercise as cover." "Ma'am, we don't have time to argue philosophy," the sergeant replied. "We either move or we eat it. Range control isn't going to put themselves between those 4 and this OP." Her earpiece crackled again, this time from Overwatch closer to the village. "Vixen Actual, be advised. Unknowns just went black. Lost them on thermal 10 seconds ago. No transponder handshake. They're in dead ground." That was worse. Heat didn't vanish. It hid. Elena's thumb hovered over the transmit key. She could feel the laminated edge of the ROE card pressing into her palm, damp with sweat. Obey and hold, disobey and move. 2 paths she knew too well. She had stood at a similar fork once, in a country whose name didn't appear on the public part of her file. Then she'd obeyed, held position, trusted higher, waited for confirmation that never came. The blast that followed had written the first reprimand that said she argued too much about ROE afterwards. She wasn't arguing now. She was out of time. "Major?" the sergeant pressed. "Say the word." Her heart rate didn't spike. It settled. Decisions like this lived in a strange calm. "Range control," she said on the official net. "This is Vixen Actual. We have 4 untagged heat signatures moving along critical infrastructure toward Talon Ridge. Request immediate clearance to maneuver and intercept." There was a pause. Too long. "Negative. Vixen Actual," came the reply. "All contractor movements are under our authority. Hold position. Any deviation is a violation of exercise ROE." On the tablet, one of the icons reappeared for a second. Closer now. Then dipped out of sight again. Her world narrowed. 4 unknowns, 10 of her people, a card full of rules, a file full of consequences. "Monitor but do not escalate," the secure email had said. If she waited, someone else might decide whether those 4 were a glitch or an attack. Someone who wasn't on this ridge, who would write clean language later about whatever happened here. She looked up, past the glow of the tablet, into the green-washed night. "Vixen elements," she said, switching to her own net. Her voice came out steady. "This is Actual. On my authority." She stopped herself, just for a heartbeat, feeling the ground tilt under the choice, the reprimands in her record, the blacked-out lines in her annex. Every time she'd been told she was the problem because she wouldn't let rules be an excuse. Then she stepped into it. Execute Contingency Vixen Delta. 2 fire teams down the ridge, flanking approach on those last known coordinates. No rounds, miles safe. You block, you surround. You do not let them touch a single piece of hardware. If anyone challenges you, you say it was an exercise inject gone sideways and you fixed it. Acknowledgements came back, clipped and immediate. The scrape of boots and sand behind her, the soft rattle of gear, the hiss of breath. On the range control net, voices spiked. "Vixen Actual, this is Control. What the hell do you think you're doing? You are not cleared to move." She keyed the transmit switch, but kept walking forward, descending with her element down the rocky slope. "Control, this is Vixen Actual," she said. "We are executing a dynamic OP4 movement in response to a live inject. Recommend you update your script." It was insubordinate. It was also technically true if she wrote the inject later. Alarms began to sound faintly from the base below, range safety tones, shouted calls as observers realized OP4 was on the move outside the plan. To her right, a private slipped, caught himself, kept going. Ahead, the darkness swallowed them, the ridge falling away toward the line where exercise ended and something else began. Elena didn't look back at the OP. The decision was made. The next chapter, good, bad, career ending, would be written from whatever they found at the bottom of this slope. Behind the rising noise on the nets, the night itself stayed indifferent, the stars cold and blank. Somewhere ahead, 4 heat signatures moved toward the wire, confident that the rules would protect them. She had just decided they wouldn't. The slope chewed at their footing as they moved down, boots sliding on loose rock. Radios crackled in overlapping layers, range control shouting, rangers complaining, observers trying to decide which script they were in. Majered Elena Markova kept her eyes ahead. The tablet strapped to her RTO's chest flickered with intermittent thermal returns. A blur here, a bright spot there, 4 shapes broken into fragments by dead ground. "Unknowns are in the draw," her sergeant whispered. 50 meters from the lower sensor line. That puts them right between us and the Rangers, she finished. "Perfect." Her headset buzzed with range control's voice, sharp and clipped. "Vixen Actual, you will halt immediately. All unscripted maneuvers are suspended pending safety review. This is not optional." She switched that net down to a whisper in her ear and turned her own up. "Vixen 1, this is Actual," she said. "Collapse your screen inward. Establish a cordon on grid Tango 4. Call it a capture drill. I want Rangers in that box and ignorant of why. Copy, Actual, came the reply. We tell them it's an inject. You tell them White Cell wants a mass detention scenario, she said. Make it sound boring. Nobody argues with boring. Her plan unfolded in 3 circles. Outer ring, Rangers. Inner ring, unknowns. Center, Vixen. All of it inside the language of training, none of it honest. At the base of the ridge, they hit flat ground. The night smelled of dust and hot electronics, the faint reek from the generator yard drifting on a reluctant breeze. Ahead, the canyoned shadows of cable runs and maintenance tracks twisted toward the village. Somewhere in there, 4 men who weren't supposed to exist inside this wire moved like they owned the gaps. Jammer? She asked. Her RTO nodded, fingers on a small control unit strapped to his kit. Microcell ready. Range is short. Spectrum limited. We'll kill local handhelds. Nothing bigger. On my mark, she said. Not yet. They slid into a shallow wadi that paralleled the route the unknowns had taken. Footsteps scuffed ahead, faint against stone. A murmur. Too quiet and too fluent to be contractors chatting about their day. Elena, Rahman whispered over their private net. One of my fire teams just linked up with a ranger squad. They're asking what game you're playing. Tell them it's a battalion-level detention inject, she said. Vixen surrounds. Rangers practice processing non-combatants. They'll hate it, but they'll stay. Everyone loves hating paperwork. She could almost hear his grimace. Copy. On a higher net, a ranger lieutenant's voice cut through. All Viking elements, be advised. White Cell just pushed a mass capture drill at Talon Ridge. Link with Op 4 to establish cordons. Yeah, I know. Just do it. Dirty, but legal, she thought. The words weren't in any regulation, but the method was. The wadi curved. She raised a fist. Vixen elements froze, dropping into the shadow of the bank. Ahead, in the narrow throat where the maintenance track dipped, 4 silhouettes broke against the stars. No Miles harness boxes, no reflective bands. Just dark figures with the wrong kind of stillness. They weren't hurrying. They thought the night belonged to them. RTO, she murmured. Now. He thumbed the jammer on. A faint electronic whine crept into the edge of her hearing, like a mosquito that wouldn't land. Down in the draw, one of the figures touched something at his shoulder, paused, tried again. Elena saw the shape of a hand held in his hand, the telltale tap-tap of someone who expected a reply and wasn't getting one. Good. No panicked calls to anyone outside the wire. Not yet. Vixen 2, she whispered on the net. You are green to begin capture drill on all ranger elements inside your cordon. Use full miles. End state, rangers detained and disarmed within the box at Tango 4. Copy, Actual, came the answer. They're going to throw a fit. Let them, she said. Fits are loud. I need loud up there. As if on cue, the night in the direction of Talon Ridge lit with harness beeps and shouted protests. Hey, what is this? White Cell didn't brief this. Sir, Op 4's hitting us with flex cuffs. Is this real? The exercise swallowed itself. Noise and confusion blooming exactly where she needed eyes to look. Down here, in the quieter dark, Elena stepped into the track and raised her M4, keeping the barrel low but obvious. Her harness chirped as she bumped it. She silenced it with a sharp smack. Gentlemen, she called in the local lingua franca, calm and clear. Contractor movement is restricted in this sector. You're off your lane. The 4 figures froze. One turned slightly, enough for her to catch the line of his jaw, the way his weight shifted to the balls of his feet. No confusion in the posture, just recalculation. We have work order, one said. His accent wasn't the contractor's familiar mix. It hit sounds too cleanly. Sensor maintenance. Then you know the script, Elena replied. She took a step closer, motioning casually with her rifle. All maintenance movements logged. Show me your badges. The nearest man didn't look down to his chest. He glanced sideways, measuring space. Behind them, her squad fanned out, a loose semicircle that could be either OPFOR theatrics or a blocking position, depending on who wrote the report. On the ridge, someone yelled, "End X!" over a loudspeaker, frustration breaking through. Down here, no one answered. The man with the fake work order shifted again. For the first time, Elena heard it, the slight hitch in his breathing that didn't match someone annoyed at bureaucratic delay. "You are OPFOR," he said slowly. "This is training." "It was," she said. "Now it's also an inspection." She took the last step that put her inside reaction distance, trusting the ring behind her to hold. "Badges," she repeated, "or we treat you as players and you die in the game. Your choice." For a second, no one moved. Then one of the men reached inside his vest. Her weapon came up, not to shoot, but to draw every eye her way. Behind the four, two Vixen soldiers moved in the blind zone, miles emitters centered on backs. Harnesses shrieked in unison as the lasers fired. To any observer, it looked like an overzealous OP4 ambush. 4 contractors taken out in a capture drill, gone a little too real. Above, range control systems would log them as exercise casualties. Somewhere else, on no network at all, someone's plan just hit a wall. The men staggered, stunned more by the move than by the electronics. One swore in a language the training packets never used. Another's hand went to his waist, fingers brushing metal instead of plastic. Elena saw the glint and stepped in, catching his wrist, twisting just enough to bring a nondescript multi-tool into view before she stripped it away. Not a weapon, not exactly, but modified in ways she recognized. "Exercise adjudication," she said sharply to her squad. "Contractors failed safety check. They're detained for white cell review." On the radio, range control erupted. "Vixen Actual, what are you doing? You are not authorized to detain contractors." "Correction Control," she said, keeping her voice level. "We executed a mass capture drill per your own guidance. 4 participants failed to follow safety procedures. Recommend you send your liaison to sort it out before the observers start asking why we let unbadged personnel walk around our towers." Silence, then a flurry of muted coordination on channels she couldn't hear. She met the eyes of the man whose wrist she still held. There was nothing of a bored contractor in them. "You're done for tonight," she told him quietly in his language, too soft for the mics. "If you're smart, you stay done." His expression didn't change, but something in his shoulders did, a very small calculation resetting. Up on Talon Ridge, Rangers argued about being captured by OPFOR again. Their anger was loud, messy, and useful. Down here, in the clean-edged dark, Elena held the line between two truths. Officially, this was all part of Iron Mirage. Unofficially, 4 men who had never been on any roster were now inside a story White Cell would have to rewrite very carefully. She could already feel the investigation reaching for her, invisible but inevitable. But for tonight, no towers fell, no generators blew, no craters bloomed where careless trust had been. Dirty but legal, she thought again, as her squad began marching the captured men back up toward the light. Tomorrow, the paperwork would start deciding which parts of this night were allowed to exist. The after-action room had no windows, just 4 walls painted a tired off-white, a long conference table, and a projector that wasn't turned on. Air conditioning hummed overhead, fighting a battle it was actually winning for once. Majin Elena Markova sat in one of the straight-backed chairs, hands resting on her knees, watching a 3-star general read about a night that officially hadn't happened. The folder in front of him was thicker than her original file had been. Tabs, colored flags, clipped annexes. The top page bore the words Iron Mirage, Incident Review. Underneath, someone had stapled copies of complaint emails, range safety reports, and white cell adjudications. Near the back, a slim section was rubber banded and stamped in red. Limited distribution, her section. Outside the door, she could hear low voices, the occasional clink of a coffee cup, the kind of sound people made when they knew something serious was being decided and were glad they weren't in the room. The general, gray hair, lean, name tape, Marshall, turned another page. His aide sat to one side, legal pad ready, pen still. No one spoke. "You're up for company, Vixen," Marshall said finally, eyes still on the text. "Conducted 37 separate unscripted actions over 10 days. "Yes, sir," Elena said. "Of those, 15 resulted in formal complaints from Ranger Battalion, 5 in white cell warnings, and 1 in an official safety stand-down request." "Yes, sir." He flipped a page. "None resulted in casualties. All stayed within the written ROE." She said nothing. He glanced up for the first time. His eyes were sharp, but not hostile. "That part isn't always true in your history, is it, Major?" "No, sir," she admitted. He went back to the file. "Walk me through Talon Ridge," he said, "in your own words." She did, carefully, without embellishment. The untagged heat signatures, the denied request to maneuver, the decision to execute contingency Vixen Delta. How she'd wrapped Rangers and unknowns in overlapping cordons and used the chaos of a capture drill to isolate 4 men who didn't belong. "Range Control says you lied to them," the aide observed quietly. "Told them you were running an inject they hadn't written." "Technically, sir," she replied. "I told them we were executing a dynamic OPFOR movement in response to a live inject. By the time the night was over, that statement was true." Marshall's mouth twitched. It might have been the ghost of a smile or heartburn. "The 4 detainees," he said. "Contractors on paper. No badges on their persons when you engaged. Modified tools. No weapons." "Not that we found in the moment," Elena said. "But they were walking hostile patterns, sir. Mapping towers, power runs, access lanes. They weren't improvising. And you know what those patterns look like." "How?" She held his gaze. "From operations compartmented above this room's need to know, sir." The aide's pen scratched a note. Marshall didn't look surprised. "Hire confirms," he said, tapping the red-stamped annex, "that the TTPs you observed match a previously active threat network. They also confirm no current indications of that network targeting this facility." "Yes, sir," she said. "So we're left with a puzzle," he continued. "Either 4 very unlucky contractors decided to cosplay as hostile recon during a high-visibility exercise, or someone used Iron Mirage as cover in a way we're not prepared to acknowledge publicly." The room felt smaller. The hum of the air conditioning seemed louder. "Do you believe you overstepped?" Marshall asked. "Yes, sir," she said. The answer surprised his aide. She heard the faint intake of breath. "I disobeyed direct guidance from Range Control and moved outside my assigned box. I detained personnel without prior white cell approval." "Do you believe you were wrong?" he asked. She thought of the tower bases that hadn't blown, the generators that were still humming, the 4 men who now sat in a compartment even she wouldn't see. "No, sir," she said. He sat back, chair creaking, and finally closed the folder. "Your record reads like 2 people," he said. "One who undermines command climate, picks fights, refuses to play nice, and one who executes small, ugly miracles in the spaces between rules. The former gets reprimands. The latter gets redacted." "I know, sir," she said. He rested a hand on the folder. "Ranger Battalion wants a scalp. Range control wants a precedent. Higher wants this not to happen again without admitting it almost did. Yes, sir. Here's what they're going to get instead. He slid the folder aside and picked up a thinner one, the new annex. Its pages were mostly black bars and unemotional bullet points. Actions taken, effects observed, recommended changes to training security. Her name appeared at the top once, then vanished into pronouns. This will live behind another wall, he said. A few people will read to the last page, frown, and adjust some procedures. Rangers get told, OP4 overstepped. Range control gets told to listen faster, and contractors get vetted harder. And me, sir? She asked. Marshall studied her for a long second. You're not Special Forces, Major, he said finally. You don't wear that tab. You don't live in their briefing slides. But you keep ending up where they do, doing work no one wants to write about. That's inconvenient, but also useful. It wasn't praise. Not exactly. I'm recommending no formal punishment, he went on. Informal? You'll be persona non grata in some circles for a while. Don't expect a welcome home basket from Ranger Regiment. I wasn't, she said. Your OP4 command will be terminated at the end of Iron Mirage. You'll be reassigned to a planning cell that handles scenarios like this. Your name won't be on the cover slides, but your fingerprints will be on the margins. He tapped the annex, then pushed it toward the aid to be rebanded and stamped again. Somebody has to design the next war we pretend to train for, Marshall said. Better it be someone who's already seen the real one try to sneak in. He stood. So did she. At some point, he added, almost as an afterthought, you're going to have to decide how many more of these last pages you're willing to live with. They add up. I know, sir, she said. He nodded once. Dismissed, Major? She saluted, turned, and left the cold room behind. The hallway outside was warmer, the voices louder. A couple of officers glanced up as she passed, curiosity flickering and then sliding away. No one stopped her. No one clapped. Outside, the desert hit her in a familiar wave of heat and light. Helicopters cut across the horizon. Somewhere in the mock village,